I used to believe family vacations were about love, bonding, and memories. But sitting at a crowded restaurant, watching my mother swipe my card for the fifth meal in a row, I realized something terrifying. This trip was never about me. It was about control, about draining me until there was nothing left. When she looked me in the eye and whispered, "This trip isn't about you," something inside me cracked. I smiled, nodded, and said nothing. What they didn't know was that I had already made my move. By dinner, everything would collapse. The phone rang at 2 a.m., the kind of hour when your chest tightens before you even pick up, because no good call comes at that time. I answered anyway, my voice groggy. On the other end, my mother didn't even bother with hello. "Bring your card, we need you," she said, as if it were the most natural request in the world. No apology, no explanation, just an order, like a soldier calling in supplies. I sat upright in bed, heart pounding, already reaching for my purse, though I hated myself for it. Maybe, I thought, maybe this trip would fix everything. Maybe if I played the dutiful daughter one more time, we would finally have the kind of family vacation you see on postcards. Maybe the smiles would be real this time. It's pathetic, isn't it? That even at 34 years old, I still wanted their approval like oxygen. I remembered being 12, standing in the kitchen, counting coins from my babysitting money to pay for my brother's basketball shoes, because Mom said, "If you really love him, you'll help." I remembered selling my prom dress on eBay to cover a utility bill my parents swore they would pay me back for. They never did, and yet I smiled through it all, convinced love required sacrifice. Family loyalty, such a beautiful phrase, until you realize it can strangle you. My mother always praised me in public. "Amanda is so responsible, always there for us." What she didn't say was that my responsibility had become her weapon, her leash. Every time I tried to pull away, she tugged harder with guilt, shame, or manipulation. And I always followed, but loyalty can be the perfect leash. By the time the trip began, the signs were already screaming at me, though I told myself to ignore them. Looking back, it feels like one of those TikTok checklists about toxic families. 7 red flags everyone else saw but me. Number 1, I was always the ATM. I booked the flights, paid for the hotel, and when we arrived at the resort, my mother looked at me with that blank entitlement that said, "You know what to do." Number 2, they kept a group chat without me, planning everything behind my back, making sure I was just the purse, not the person. Number 3, every time I questioned an expense, they gaslighted me. "Stop being dramatic. You're lucky to be with us." Number 4, the endless comparisons. "Your brother is so much more fun, Amanda. Why can't you relax?" Number 5, never a word of acknowledgement. I was invisible labor, driver, planner, financier, but never the daughter worth celebrating. Number 6, the secrecy. My father hid receipts, my mother whispered about arrangements I was never included in. And number 7, the guilt. The constant reminder that I was selfish if I didn't comply, that blood was thicker than my boundaries. Have you ever been in a room where everyone smiled except you? That's what dinner felt like on the second night. They laughed, they toasted, they posed for photos like a happy family, and I sat there swallowing resentment with every bite. They weren't laughing with me, they were laughing at the free ride I provided. My mother leaned over during dessert, and whispered, "Relax, this trip isn't about you." It was like a knife slipped under my ribs. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook under the table, hidden in my lap. I looked at them, my parents, my brother, faces lit by candlelight, masks of joy that cost me every dollar. And it clicked. I wasn't family to them. I was funding. That night in the hotel, I scrolled through my phone, my heart a storm in my chest. By accident, I stumbled on my brother's Instagram story. In the corner of the screen, I saw a notification, family chat. I tapped, expecting to see my name, but it wasn't there. It was a group chat of my parents, my siblings, and even my sister-in-law, planning family bonding activities, mocking me for being uptight, and laughing about how much I would end up paying. The air left my lungs. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. All this time, I thought I was buying love, buying inclusion, but I wasn't even on the guest list of my own family. They had built a digital living room without me and laughed in it every night. The group chat wasn't the only secret. It was a Sunday morning when the notification flashed across my phone. My brother had posted a picture to Facebook, and for some reason, the algorithm decided I should see it. I tapped without thinking, expecting another blurry beach shot or cocktail selfie. But my stomach turned cold when the image loaded. It was a birthday cake, glowing with 30 candles, surrounded by my family, their faces beaming. And there, front and center, my mother held a knife above the cake, frozen in a laugh. The caption read, "Best family night ever." The problem was, it wasn't my brother's birthday. It wasn't my father's. It was mine. I stared at the screen, unable to blink. My throat tightened until it felt like swallowing glass. They had thrown me a birthday party, without me. No invitation, no mention, not even a token text to cover their tracks. For a moment, I thought it must be a joke, some cruel mix-up. But the comments below told the truth. "So glad you all got together. What a perfect night. Family goals." Each exclamation mark carved deeper into me, proof that my absence was intentional. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the air conditioning humming too loud, my chest heaving. I had been invisible before, but this was erasure. They weren't just ignoring me, they were celebrating my existence without me, as if I were a ghost, funding their good time. Tears came hot and unrelenting. I curled into myself, clutching the phone as though it might explain why. The loneliness hit like a tidal wave, drowning me in the realization that no matter how much I gave, I was never truly part of them. They had carved me out of my own family portrait. I wept until the pillow was damp, until exhaustion numbed me. And when the tears finally stopped, there was silence, a silence so sharp, it felt like the moment before a storm. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and somewhere in that silence, something inside me shifted. But the real betrayal was yet to come. The next morning, my resolve was different. Instead of feeling like prey, I felt like a hunter learning the terrain. I started small, opening my banking app, scrolling back through the transactions. Line after line told the story I had been ignoring. Hundreds spent on meals, tours, souvenirs I never chose. I took screenshots, my fingers trembling but steady enough to capture evidence. At breakfast, I placed my phone face down on the table, recording every word. "Amanda, order something nice for us," my father said casually, Like I was the server. My mother chimed in, "You're so lucky to be here with us." I smiled, nodded, and let the phone collect every drop of poison. Later, in the quiet of my room, I organized the files. Screenshots in one folder, audio clips in another. I even started photographing receipts I found stuffed in my mother's purse, crumpled proof of her dependence. It felt clinical, methodical. And yet, behind the steady motions, my heart hammered with adrenaline. One night, curiosity pulled me deeper. I opened my credit report, something I hadn't checked in months. My breath caught when I saw a new inquiry, an application for a line of credit under my name. Not approved yet, but submitted. I clicked for details. The applicant's phone number matched my mother's. My hands went ice cold. She wasn't just using my card. She was trying to bind me legally, financially, into a debt I hadn't agreed to. It was no longer about meals or trips. It was about ownership. For a long time, I sat there in the glow of the laptop, my pulse thundering in my ears. Anger rose like heat from the floor, but beneath it was something sharper. Clarity. This wasn't love warped by need. This was theft disguised as family duty. They had crossed from manipulation into crime. Would you forgive or fight? I closed the laptop slowly, as though sealing a pact with myself. My reflections stared back from the black screen, eyes rimmed red but fierce. I had been the obedient daughter, the family wallet, the silent witness. That part of me had died the moment I saw my birthday party without me. Tomorrow, the rules of the game change. The first step was access. My brother had bragged once about the family iCloud album, how it automatically synced everything. So convenient, so safe. He never imagined I would use that same convenience against them. With a few guesses, his dog's name, his birthday, I slipped inside. Suddenly, their entire archive unfolded in front of me. Photos, scans, even PDFs that should never have been there. Scrolling through felt like trespassing into their secrets, but my chest tightened when I saw the unmistakable shape of my own documents, my tax returns, copies of my driver's license, even bank forms. And then I froze. One file showed my father's hand, steady and deliberate, feeding my financial papers through a home scanner. The date stamp was only weeks old. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. Identity theft. Not strangers, not hackers, my own parents. They had stolen more than money. They had stolen my very name, the proof of who I was. I pressed the phone to my chest, trying to steady my breath, fighting the instinct to scream. The room was silent, except for the thud of my pulse in my ears. The betrayal no longer had shadows. It was blinding, written in digital ink. I had been erased from their birthday party, but here they were, writing me into debts I never chose. And then she found a name she never expected. Buried among the files was an authorization form, half-filled, my signature forged with sloppy precision. But the co-signer line didn't have my parents' names. It had my ex-husband's. For a long moment, I stared at the letters, my mind refusing to shape them into reality. Daniel, the man I once trusted, the man who walked away 2 years ago, had been sending money to my parents. He wasn't just gone, he was helping them chain me. The revelation gutted me. It wasn't only my parents against me. It was collusion, a network of betrayal I hadn't even imagined. My chest ached with humiliation, but beneath it, a colder feeling formed. Purpose. I couldn't face them alone. I needed allies. I started with the lawyer, a young woman named Kayla, fresh out of law school, but already building a reputation online for exposing family exploitation cases. I sent her an email attaching the evidence I had: screenshots, audio clips, the forged documents. Her reply came within hours. "You're not crazy. They're committing fraud. Let's talk." For the first time in weeks, I felt less insane, less alone. Next, I called Lena, my college roommate, who now worked at a bank. She met me for coffee, and when I showed her the credit inquiry, she nodded grimly. "They're trying to saddle you with debt you'll never shake. We'll put a freeze on your credit reports." Her efficiency calmed me, but her eyes shone with anger on my behalf. Finally, I turned to strangers. I typed into Reddit, "raised by narcissists." I poured my story into the void, not expecting an answer. Within hours, replies flooded in. People who had lived versions of my nightmare, who knew the exact ache of being devoured by the people who claimed to love you. They offered advice, empathy, warnings. Each comment was a lifeline, weaving me into a community that said, "You are not alone." But then came the twist I wasn't prepared for. In a late-night message, Kayla sent me a discovery. Bank transfers from Daniel, my ex-husband, straight into my parents' account. Dates overlapped with times when he claimed he couldn't afford alimony. The money had been siphoned not just from me, but from the settlement he owed. My parents had been his cover, his excuse, his partners. I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing screen, anger crawling like fire under my skin. Betrayal layered upon betrayal, until it became almost absurd. Husband, parents, even the legal system had bent against me. I picked up my pen and opened a blank page in my journal, hands trembling as I wrote. "They think I am weak. They think I will fold, but they don't know me anymore. I am done being their daughter, their wallet, their scapegoat. From this day forward, I am not surviving. I am fighting." The words bled onto the page, shaky but fierce. Writing them felt like breaking a spell. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine victory, not just escape, but exposure. Justice, freedom. I closed the journal and sat in the dim light, listening to the hum of the city outside. My body was exhausted, but my mind pulsed with focus, sharper than it had ever been. It was no longer just survival. It was war. Lunch was supposed to be effortless, another indulgent moment on my mother's carefully curated itinerary. We sat in a sunlit restaurant overlooking the ocean, the kind of place that offered menus without prices because only certain people were expected to eat there. My father ordered wine without hesitation. My brother laughed too loudly to sing. At his own jokes, my mother leaned back like a queen surveying her kingdom. When the bill came, she didn't even glance at me this time. She slid her card to the waiter with the confidence of someone who believed the world bent for her. But then the silence came. The waiter returned, his polite smile faltering. He leaned down, voice low, but loud enough for the table to hear. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The card has been declined." Imagine the silence when the waiter whispers, "Declined." My mother blinked, confused at first, then indignant. "That's impossible. Run it again." The waiter obliged. Again, the same quiet apology. My brother snickered nervously. My father muttered something about banks always messing things up. My mother's cheeks flushed crimson. I sipped my water, calm, almost serene, because I knew what they didn't. Not only was the card frozen, but the hotel reservation tied to it had been canceled as well. Their room keycards would stop working by nightfall. Their entire facade, their little empire of control, was crumbling in real time. "Try another card," my father demanded, but my mother hesitated. She didn't have another. For years, my financial leash had been their lifeline, and now it was gone. The silence stretched across the table, broken only by the clink of dishes from other families dining nearby, unaware they were witnessing the slow implosion of mine. My mother's hands shook as she reached for her phone, her voice sharp. "Amanda, give them your card. Fix this." I smiled, slow and deliberate, the way a condemned prisoner might smile when the executioner trips. "I can't," I said softly. "This trip isn't about me, remember?" But humiliation was only the appetizer. That evening, when they realized the hotel had locked them out of their room, panic set in. My father argued with the receptionist. My mother begged. My brother paced like a trapped animal. I stood a few feet away, watching the performance I had seen all my life. Desperation disguised as authority, manipulation dressed as entitlement, and for once I didn't play my part. By the next morning, their desperation had morphed into fury. Social media posts appeared like wildfire. My mother's Facebook page read, "Our daughter abandoned us on vacation. We're stranded, betrayed, heartbroken." My brother added, "Blood should mean something, but for her, it doesn't." For a moment, I felt the sting. Old instincts whispered, "Explain yourself, apologize." Fix it says fix it, but then I opened my phone and scrolled through my folders. Screenshots of receipts, recordings of their commands, copies of forged documents. The truth was mine, sharp and undeniable. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, legs trembling, thumb hovering over the screen. Posting meant exposure, not just for them, but for me. The world would know my story, my shame. But families rot. My hand shook, my breath shallow. I whispered to myself, "It's time," and I pressed post. Photos appeared first, the bills, the endless charges, then audio, my mother's voice demanding, my father mocking, my brother laughing. Finally, the forged paperwork, evidence of fraud. I captioned it simply, "This is what abandonment really looks like." For a long moment, nothing happened. The room was too quiet, the glow of the phone too harsh. Then the notifications began, likes, shares, comments. The story spread faster than I imagined, a wildfire consuming their carefully built reputation. Strangers rallied to my side. Survivors of toxic families shared their own scars, amplifying my post. "You're not alone," one wrote. "We see you," said another. Every comment stitched me back together, piece by fragile piece. And within hours, the internet took sides. Justice didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It came in whispers, in the shifting glances of people who once admired my parents, but now saw them for who they were. Within days of my post, the comments turned to conversations, and those conversations reached the ears of their closest friends. Invitations disappeared. Phone calls went unanswered. At church, where my mother once relished her role as the perfect matriarch, the pews beside her grew emptier each week. The woman who had thrived on power suddenly had none. My father, once boastful at dinner parties, now struggled to find anyone who would meet his eyes. The collapse was slow, but it was thorough. What they valued most, the illusion of respectability, was gone. Then came the twist that neither of us could have predicted. A woman named Carol messaged me late one night. She introduced herself as an old acquaintance of my parents, someone who had done business with them years ago. "I saw your story," she wrote. "I believe you, because they did the same thing to me." Her message spilled out like poison from an old wound. My parents had convinced her to invest in a family venture, only to drain her savings and vanish when she asked for repayment. She'd been too ashamed to pursue legal action back then, but now seeing me speak up gave her courage. "They've been doing this for years," she confessed. "You're not their first victim." I sat frozen, the words burning on my screen. It was bigger than me. My parents hadn't just exploited their daughter, they had built a lifetime of deceit, feeding on anyone naive enough to trust them. Screenshots of her documents, bank transfers, and emails followed. I forwarded them to Kayla, my lawyer, who replied almost instantly, "This changes everything." The power shifted overnight. What once was my solitary fight became a pattern of fraud too loud to ignore. My parents weren't facing just a daughter's revenge. They were facing exposure from multiple fronts. For the first time, they weren't feared, they were pitied. The courtroom was cold, impersonal, and yet I felt warmth blooming inside me as I sat there, listening. The judge's voice was steady, the documents undeniable. My lawyer presented not only the evidence of forged credit applications in my name, but also Carol's testimony. Each exhibit stacked like bricks in a wall they couldn't climb. When the verdict came, it was surgical. The court froze their accounts, revoked every line of credit, tied to my name, and barred them from attempting to open new ones. Their financial power, the tool they had used to control me, was cut off at the root. I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat. I simply sat there, hands folded in my lap, as my parents crumbled beside me. My mother wept silently. My father muttered about betrayal, but their words no longer penetrated me. The leash had been severed. Outside, they tried to reach me. Calls filled my phone, voicemails dripping with desperation. "Amanda, we can explain. Sweetheart, don't do this to us. We're still family." Each plea was an echo of years past, rehearsed scripts meant to reel me back in. But this time, I didn't answer. One afternoon, I left my phone at home and walked to the park. The autumn air was crisp, the trees painted gold, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without weight on my chest. I sat on a bench, watching children chase one another, listening to the laughter I had never truly known. My lungs filled with air that felt different, lighter, unclaimed. This was justice, not in fireworks or vengeance, but in the quiet reclaiming of myself. Yet as I sat there, I felt something unexpected, emptiness. Without the fight, without the constant war for survival, who was I? Freedom tasted strange, almost hollow, like silence after a storm. My parents were defeated, their power dismantled. But what came next? But freedom comes with a price. I thought justice would feel like a finish line. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a new beginning, unsure of which path to take. The courtroom was behind me, the silence of my phone now permanent, and for the first time in decades, I was no longer tethered to their demands. Freedom was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. When you've lived your whole life chained, even open air can feel overwhelming. I needed a way to process everything, so I wrote. One night, curled on my couch with the hum of the city outside, I poured my story into words, not as an angry daughter, not as a victim, but as someone reclaiming herself. I posted it on Medium under the title, When Family Becomes a Cage. I expected a handful of views, maybe a stranger's kind comment. Instead, it went viral. By morning, thousands had read it. By afternoon, tens of thousands. Comments flooded in, people who saw themselves in my story, who whispered thank you through the glow of their screens. Survivors of toxic families confessed their hidden scars, their silent struggles, their longing to break free. My inbox overflowed with messages. I thought I was alone. You just told my life story. Because of you, I have hope. The story was picked up by larger outlets, then by a daytime talk show. Suddenly, I was sitting under studio lights, a microphone clipped to my dress, telling the world how the people meant to protect me had been the ones who cut me deepest. The audience gasped in the right places, applauded when I described freezing the card, leaned forward when I spoke about building boundaries. And in those moments, I realized something. My pain had become my power, but I wasn't interested in fame. Fame is fragile, fleeting. What mattered was connection. I began speaking at small workshops, then larger conferences, standing in front of rooms filled with people who had lived my same story in different forms. Mothers who had cut ties with abusive parents, men who had walked away from inheritance wars, women who had survived years of financial control. We were a hidden army, and now we were finding each other. Would you dare cut off blood to save your soul? I asked at one conference, my voice steady, my heart pounding. Hands rose in the audience, people cried, and in that moment, I wasn't alone anymore. But Amanda's final gift to herself wasn't fame. It was boundaries. Boundaries became my new luxury, more precious than money. I implemented them ruthlessly, not with anger, but with clarity. No contact with my parents. Calls went unanswered, messages deleted, letters returned unopened. I limited my social media to trusted circles. I kept my financial information locked tighter than a vault. And for every no I said to them, I found myself saying yes to me. Yes to therapy, where I learned that love without respect isn't love at all. Yes to friends who checked in on me, who offered laughter without cost. Yes to myself, to sleeping in peace, to breathing without guilt. Boundaries were not walls, they were doors with locks I controlled for the first time. Still, the world didn't stop spinning just because I walked away. Bills needed paying, careers needed building. So I turned my writing into more than catharsis. I turned it into a platform. The Medium piece led to a book deal. My talks led to consulting work, helping organizations recognize toxic dynamics in workplaces and families alike. Slowly, my bank account grew, but this time it was mine. Every dollar felt like a reclamation. And then came something I hadn't dared hope for: friendship, real, unfiltered, mutual friendship. I found it first in the online survivor community, then in the faces of people who had read my story and wanted to meet in person. Dinners where the bill was split, without guilt. Road trips where laughter, not manipulation, filled the car. Birthdays where the cake had my name on it, and the candles were blown out by choice, not obligation. One evening, I sat at a long table in a cozy restaurant, surrounded by these new friends, my chosen family. The air buzzed with laughter, inside jokes, the clinking of glasses. For the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I felt my smile reach my eyes. No one was calculating what they could take from me. No one was whispering behind my back. I was simply Amanda, and that was enough. As the night wore on, I excused myself to the restroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were clear, no longer rimmed with exhaustion. My posture was different, no longer bent under invisible weight. I looked like someone I had never met before, someone whole. "This trip wasn't about me," I whispered, remembering my mother's words like a curse. Then I smiled, touching the glass as if to seal the truth I now lived. But my new life is, walking back to the table, the sound of laughter pulled me in like sunlight. For once, I didn't feel like an outsider peering through a window. I was at the center, surrounded by people who chose me, not because of what I could give, but because of who I was. Empowerment isn't about revenge, it's about resurrection. Catharsis isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to leave. I had spent a lifetime waiting for my family to love me. In the end, I learned that love wasn't something I had to earn. It was something I could build, choose, and give freely, once I gave it to myself first. And that was the ending I never saw coming.